welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I'm back with yet another co-host. My co-host is joining me from the other side of the pond. I'm here in Canada, and Ola's here with us today, host of the Real Happy Hour podcast. I've been listening. I love it. It's a great show. Everyone needs to go and subscribe and follow and give Ola lots of love on his podcast. Ola, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the How to Podcast series. My co-host.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much, David. I am so happy and excited to just, get this ball rolling, connect with a lot of the listeners and just share my journey and hopefully inspire people that are listening. And this is fantastic. I've also been listening to your podcast and I'm excited to be here. This is going to be cool.
Well, now I'm nervous. So that's great. Well, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Ola, tell us about the Real Happy Hour podcast. You are in season 1. I'm seeing, 10 episodes? Yeah, 10. And you talk Barbie in episode 10. So everyone has to go check that out. Tell us, how did the podcast start? And tell us more about your show.
Absolutely. So the Real Happy Hour podcast is a podcast that delves into the character dynamics, the relational dynamics of characters in films and TV. And because my background is in film, I studied film and I also got a bit of experience in content production. I've always wanted to just have that in my life, expressed in my life now, which is why I'm doing the podcasting. And hopefully anyone listening can sort of, get inspired by this. So what the goal really is to, create a network of creatives and we're able to create content together. And so the podcast really, we dive into the relationships of the characters in films and TV shows. And so I've documented or recorded episodes on Black Panther, The Woman King, Barbie, that's the latest one, which was very interesting because it was me and another African Arab man. We were meant to be 3. It was meant to be a lady in there, but she was unfortunately unavailable. And I thought, this is quite a twist because we're 2 Black men talking about Barbie. And what's funny is like when you go on YouTube and you try to like read the reviews of Barbie, there's a lot of feminism bashing and there's a lot of it's just a lot of hate and vitriol. And I just thought, wow, I'm a Black African man and I'm creating this content that sort of sheds light on what I received in the movie, which is like this is more of a commentary on how gender construct is affecting our lives and how we're living instead of it being anything toxic. So yeah.
It's amazing. I love it. How do you decide the topics of your show?
So I have a conversation with a guest. That's usually how it goes. I have sometimes it's a face-to-face call. Sometimes it's like a virtual call or an actual telephone call, and we just converse and I ask them about their lives. What do they like? And so I don't just decide the topic. We decide together what we talk about. So that way it's more conversational. And that's something that's very important for podcasters. Like you have to just make sure when you're on a show, like you're having a conversation and it's not an interview. And, you know, that's what we like. You can agree we like that. We enjoy when we're like having a podcast and we're just having a conversation instead of it being question, answer. Like it just flows better. You're learning more and then you're having a conversation. It's just better for us, the host, and for the listener.
It's amazing. And your background is in journalism, content producer. You've done a lot of that in your past. What for you is an advantage from your background that leads you into podcasting and helps you to create your show from your journalism background, for example?
So from my journalism background, I learned how to, write a script, like write a story, develop a story. I learned the structure. I learned how to meet people, how to engage with people and communicate what I need from them in terms of a guest or things of that nature. I learned how to even get a crew, assemble a crew. When I got my master's in journalism, I learned how to actually use a camera. I learned how to edit. And so those were skills that were just very helpful. And initially, I was a journalist for many years. I was a blogger. I was writing for different magazines and I was also a TV reporter. And then I just stumbled into content production. And I enjoyed it so much. I was like, okay, this is amazing. This is nice. And so I was able to take my journalism skills and the experience I gained from the production and I took all of that into podcasting. So like when I started my podcast, the Real Happy Hour podcast, I was the producer, editor, location scout. I was scouting everyone, and it was all because of the skills I gained from being a journalist and the experience in content production. I was the cameraman, I was the editor, I was everything. And now we're like in August right now, like 8 months into this, and now I finally have a cameraman. I now have an editor. And this is all because I'm trying to improve the production. I'm trying to make it better. I'm seeing and I'm improving. And I think one of the important things that I've learned is even speaking, like initially, like the very first few episodes, like I learned so much about like the cadence in my voice and how I'm pronouncing certain words. And because I'm African, like
Mhm.
there's this, I need to make sure I'm enunciating my words very clearly for everyone to be able to understand, because when you're podcasting, you've got access to millions of people. You don't know who could access this information. So it's a journey of learning and developing. So whoever's listening out there, like you just need to take it on. You'll make mistakes, but just having that purpose-filled mission of, okay, I'm doing something that I enjoy and I'm taking all the skills that I have to the best of my knowledge and just putting the work out there, and the work will speak for itself.
One thing I love doing, Ola, is looking at my stats, looking at my analytics when I put out my episodes and doing some research on who's listening to my show. And I'm always amazed at what country is represented, how old they are. Some of the stats that we get when we look at our information, it's outstanding to know that someone's listening to my podcast in Africa or in Australia or England. Like it's amazing to know that our voice through a microphone can go out into the world. And like you said, anyone can access this. And just that feedback that we get by looking at, wow, someone's listening to my show, that feels so good as a host. For you, what does that feel like for you to know that there's
It
actually people listening to this?
it does. It feels amazing. And like I do look at the stats too, and that people that are listening from places I've never even heard of before, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's phenomenal. Like, and I also think being involved in groups very helpful, because when you're sharing your content with like Facebook groups, for example, or any other LinkedIn groups, and you're commuting and you're speaking with them, it gives you access to even more people. So I believe as a podcaster, it's important that you sort of align yourself with groups of other like-minded podcasters, so you
right.
can even reach, like for example, what we're doing right now. This is fantastic because I'm engaging with you and also engaging with your amazing listeners, and
Mhm.
it's just it's it's a wonderful world out there when you get to see how your voice is reaching so many people. It's really amazing. Like I can imagine for you, you've been doing this for a minute, and your listeners, you've got thousands of listeners. Like you really, honestly, you're the kind of podcaster I'm aspiring to be like, and it's
Wow.
it's it's really amazing to like have this opportunity to be guest speaking on your show, because now hopefully involved in this mission of inspiring other future podcasters, and it's amazing. So yeah.
And the one thing that makes us all the same, Ola, is that when we start a new show or we release a new episode, everyone starts with 0 listens. 0 people have heard the episode. Doesn't matter if you are the most popular person in the world or if you're starting your podcast today and no one knows your name, everyone starts from the same place, 0. What happens after that could be a mix of anything, right? Being a popular person, whatever, been doing this for a long time, having an audience, that takes time. But we all start from the same spot. Every time we release an episode, 0 listens. We all start at 0. That's the nice equalizing thing for my podcast, for your podcast, for the person listening who hasn't even recorded episode 1 yet. We're all starting at 0. It's what happens after 0 takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time, a lot of love and passion for us as podcast hosts to build a community, but it's possible for anyone to connect with anyone anywhere else in the world just by recording their voice. And the only way you're going to grow your show is to hit record and put it out there into the world. Until you put it out into the world, there's no chance for anyone to hear your show. So even though it might feel hard or you might not feel like you're doing the best job on your podcast, in the early days, you have to start somewhere. And I know when I started this podcast, I would have 5 listens, 10 listens. I was happy because it was connecting with someone and helping somebody. That was the only goal I had. I didn't have a goal for hundreds of thousands of listens. I had the goal of reaching one person and encouraging them to start a podcast. That was my goal. And as soon as I saw that one come back every single episode, I'm like, there it is. That was my goal. And I think we really need, as podcast hosts, to set a very realistic goal of what our podcast is going to be and what that success is for us. Do you have an idea for you in your mind of when the Real Happy Hour podcast will be a success? What is your measurement?
For me, funny enough, I don't think the amount of engagement is amazing, and that would be is like amazing. But the goal for me really is that I can actually use the network from the people coming onto my show. We're able to create something together. That is when I feel like, okay, this is a success. Like we're actually making use of this network, and we've also got engagements, and so they're watching the story unfold. That is my measurement of a successful podcast, because that really, like, for example, when I listen to stories of creators like Issa Rae, where they started from online YouTube and they built this amazing community, and they took all of that into like network TV. Now she's got, deals with HBO, she's starring in
Yeah.
movies, and she's writing, and it's all from this engagement. And she's also still working with like the people she started with, and it's it's beautiful, and that is for me. That is my goal. That is the benchmark for me, and it's amazing to be able to see someone like Issa Rae and I see that that is a goal I'm trying to reach. Yeah. Yeah.
So when are you going to have them on your podcast?
What did them?
Have Issa Rae on your podcast?
Ooh, Issa Rae.
Come
That would
on,
be, yeah. Why
right?
not?
Why not?
That would be amazing. Having someone like Issa Rae on my podcast, because even like I was in conversations with a cinema trying to engage, because obviously the Real Happy Hour podcast is about films and TV. And
Mhm.
so I'm trying to also set up a film club. And so I was engaging with cinema houses to, host screenings and things of that nature. And this is all because I saw Issa Rae do something similar. And so to now be able to do this with the cinema and then get to interview Issa Rae, have her on the show, that'd be amazing. And I guess if you can think it, you can do it. I think that's how the saying goes. So you just have to keep thinking it and making all the plans to bring it to fruition. And you never know. The universe really does respond back to you when you put it out there. Like, this was all an idea I had last year
Mhm.
because I was working in IT, and I left media for a minute since lockdown, and I
Yeah.
wanted to just get back into it. And it was all an idea. Like I'm like, oh, what do I need to create something? So anyone listening, you just need to just first of all have that idea, and if you can think of that idea, you will be able to somehow find. This has been the strangest part of actually my journey, is the way I've been finding people who can actually support me, like the guests.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to a networking event, I'm meeting an actor, I'm meeting a director, I'm meeting a producer, I'm meeting journalists, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do something. And they're like, sure, you come on and we'll speak with you and we'll have a conversation with
Mhm.
you. And I'm like, wow, this is the universe just sort of responding to me wanting to do something. And
Right.
so this is all from my idea of, okay, I want to do this, and the universe is responding back positively, and it's all about thinking it and doing it.
That's the hardest part. The thinking and doing, I think, is the hardest thing. But once you can figure out the big why behind your podcast and who your audience is, you're on a great path, right? And that's exciting. Um, do you have a goal for your podcast? Is it going to be? Do you have like, I'll know that I'm on the right path when I get to this mile marker, this milestone? Do you have something kind of planned out that you're kind of working towards, or is it just kind of open that you're just going to
It's,
keep
it's
going?
open. But
Okay.
I would like to be, yeah, I'm open to all possibilities, but I would like to be that seen as that person, that podcaster who is highly regarded in the field of like reviewing content and hosting content. Like that is the goal outside of, being able to create content with the network I'm building, but also being recognized as that person that can very well hold a show, perhaps host a show. And I'm just sort of leaving because back when I was 10, 12 years old, I always wanted to be a journalist. And, you know, that has always been the very first dream I had, like right from high school. Everyone wants to be a doctor, a lawyer, and I've always been like, I want to be a journalist. That's what I
Nice.
want to do. And so just being able to leave that and representing different brands, working with different people, amazing people, successful people. I'm learning, I'm sharing my skills. I think that's when I feel like, yes, this is it. I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And if that doesn't look the way I'm thinking it would look now, I will just keep doing what I'm doing because at this point, what I'm doing is even more than I thought I would be doing like a year ago. And
Yeah.
so if I just keep doing this, it's also a form of success because I'm putting myself out there and I'm creating the content and it's meeting different people and it's attracting different people and so this is also a form of like so on a smaller scale, but it's still success. And so I'm also grateful for where I am. So I think anyone listening, like every every part of your journey is a win because you started the process.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what about for journalists that are listening to our conversation? They haven't started a podcast. They're trying to figure out the value of their journalism background and podcasting and that bridge between the two. From your perspective, is it important for someone in journalism to think about podcasts? Can it benefit them
I think
as a journalist?
it definitely was as a benefit as a journalist to do something like podcasting because at this point, podcasting is one of the most um relevant tools out there. And one thing I've also experienced that is very important is if you want to be you're starting out as a journalist, you need to have a portfolio of something that you're doing to present
Right.
as a catalog of this is what I have, this is what I can do. Before anyone can actually buy into what you can do, you
Mm.
need to have like proof that I can do it. And so it's important for a journalist, like right from uni, you should, or even if you didn't go to uni, you should be blogging, write for a community paper, join a community radio station, join any way you can be a part of a community media outlet. Start from there and just keep building your portfolio, building your catalog of work. And because skills and experience are very important in this field of journalism. So that's the best advice I would give. You just need to just start building your experience. And podcasting is also you can start from your home. You can start, just
Yeah.
you can get from your phone, you can just open up your laptop, get a microphone and just speak. And you also have to have a message. What is it that you're trying to share? What are you trying to, what value are you bringing into the world? What is your message? And I think for me, for example, I've always wanted to have a space for people. I've always wanted to have a space where people can express. Because even going back to when I was in uni, when I was younger, and I created like websites, and it was always about okay, creating a space where people can submit content. So I feel like that's always been my thing of I need to just create a space for people to, you know, express themselves. So you need to just find what your value is and how you can bring that value out into the world. And so podcasting is important. So I would advise anyone listening, if you're a journalist, you're a young or whatever age you are, and you feel like you have something important for the world to know about, because even if it feels like there's someone similar doing something, they can never do it the way you would do it.
Right.
So you just have to just put it out there And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's another thing. Perfect is the enemy of good. Is that how the saying goes?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and you will just keep holding yourself back because you keep thinking, oh no, I need to have this before I can do this. But you just have to just start, and that is the hardest part. Funny enough, is the starting. But
Yeah.
once you start, that's it. And I also think it's good to have someone you're accountable to, because I've got an accountable partner who they make sure that I am constantly living up to my promises or my deadlines or my expectations. And so when I've got someone accountable, it's helpful because it's more than just me. It's like, I mean, it's part of me, but it's like I have to do it because I've got someone who's checking me
Right.
to make sure that the work is getting done.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Well, you hit that milestone of 10 episodes. Many podcasters starting out seem to fall off around 5, 7, 10 episodes. They just stop. Either podcasting wasn't what they anticipated, they didn't make $1 million after episode one, so there's some misconceptions around podcasting that it's easy when it's not always easy. Like, it's a lot of work to do all this, and it does eat into your time and your calendar, and you have to say no to something to make room for this in your daily life. What's been hard for you now with 10 episodes as you kind of look back? What's some of the hard things that you've had to learn during the beginning?
I think in the beginning, the passion was so intense and phenomenal. Like I was so happy. Like I would stay up late editing, working. Like when you start podcasting, it is the most beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Then I got to episode 7.
Yes, right.
And then that is when it just became a lot. So you have to figure out, you always have to have that memory of the beginning. Your why has to always be at the back of your mind. Like, why am I doing this? What is the goal? Has to always be there. Because at a certain point, when, like as I said earlier, like I was the producer, the editor, like it became overwhelming at a certain point. And I just lost a bit of that. And that was because I was doing a bit too much where I had to record in studio. So when I started, it was all like I rented a studio space, I rented a camera, I rented what else did I rent? I think those were the main things that I rented. And so on the day of the shoot, I would go get the camera and I would travel or back to the studio, record, take the camera back, go home, edit. While it was amazing in the start, at a certain point, it started to get a bit heavy.
Mhm.
And then I started realizing there are other tools I can virtually record. But because I just initially didn't want to virtually record, I just had this vision of it has to be face to face. But I have to be realistic. Like where at this point, virtual connections and conversations are very useful and time efficient. And you can still get the same message across. You can still get the same information. And so by utilizing virtual connections, just like we're doing right now,
Yeah.
conversations, it's just significantly helped. And then being able to get a team. While I know not everyone is able to afford getting a team, I got young people to help me out, straight out of uni or still in uni.
Mhm.
So the cameraman I got is still in uni. The editor is just out of uni. So they're still younger. They're trying to build their portfolio. So
Mhm.
that's how it's been somewhat helpful for me that, okay, I'm finding people, a network of people that can help support in the production of this podcast. And so it's lifted a bit of the weight off of me. But you will definitely get to a point where it gets overwhelming, and also because I was also trying other things. Like I'm trying to do a film group, and and then I tried to do radio just to build more of my skills. And so like there were other things that were sort of happening as I was creating this podcast, of other opportunities, and so my mind was getting sort of pulled. I was getting distracted, and so there was just a lot of things happening at the same time, and thank God for my accountability partner who's like, okay, you have to remember the beginning was the podcast. Like you need to go
Mhm.
back to the source and just honing back on that. Yes, it's a bit easier to be distracted by something new because I'm more excited. It's new. I'm excited.
Yeah. Right.
So you have to sort of remember what was the source of the podcast. And so I figured, okay, I need to just scale back on the production. The production, while it's scaled back, the level is still good, and I'm able to be less overwhelmed. And when you start, you'll probably go through these emotions, but you just have to remember your why and and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Yeah.
It's great. It's great. Okay, so again, for a new podcaster listening and they're ready to start their show, um, any suggestions from your perspective on figuring out the name of your podcast? Like, I love the name of yours, the Real Happy Hour Podcast. Any thoughts from your perspective on naming your show? How important is it, and how did you name your show?
So I named my show. It was really inspired by a lot of the things I enjoy, the podcasts I enjoy. So one of the podcasts I enjoy is Drink Champs, which is on YouTube. I love watching podcasts instead of listening. I prefer watching it. And
Good.
so that was a show I watched. And on the show, they've got celebrities on there and they're just drinking happy hour. It's a drink champ. So they're drinking. And then again the guests like inebriated and revealing and they end up revealing even more than they were intending to. And it's just so much fun. And so I was like, okay, I like this idea. And I also like the idea of, because I was thinking ahead of sponsorship, happy hour, this connoting drinks. And so I would like to get sponsorship from, brands, alcohol brands or beverages and things of that nature to be a potential sponsor. And then Real was, film Real. So, it speaks for itself in terms of, talking about content and I just added all of that together, the Real Happy Hour podcast, and
Nice.
it made sense. And yes, it is very important for you to figure out what your podcast is going to be named, because that is it tells your podcast before you have to say anything about your podcast. And so it's important for you to hone in on exactly what the message is. And because I like positive, fun, light energy, happiness, I'm a very cheerful guy. Like that's what I like. I would like everyone to feel that. And even now, sometimes I look back or listen back and I'm like, it needs to be a bit happier. This podcast, this happy hour needs to be a bit happier. I need to get the guest a bit more, a bit more drinks. And so that will come about when, there's more money coming in and also sometimes it's also being recorded in the morning. So it's being appropriate for them to drink in the morning. But at the end of the day, it's just about having a positive vibe and just honing on what you want your podcast to be about and name it what it connotes. Yeah.
Great.
I was gonna ask, like, what has been your difficult? Because you've been doing this and your numbers are like phenomenal. Like, what when was your difficult moment?
Well, that's a good question. For me, I guess it's just balancing my work, because I still work full time and I do this on my days off. Balancing my calendar, staying motivated when there's days where I just need a break. Like I have 7 shows, right? So when you're recording 7 different podcasts, you're meeting people from around the world, which I find probably the biggest joy for me is to talk to you, for example. And we're nowhere close to each other right now, which is great. I guess just staying motivated to keep going. My calendar keeps me motivated because I keep getting emails, which is fabulous. People wanting to be on the show or to communicate or to partner together. I love that. And I love giving people an opportunity to share their story. And so that keeps me happy and motivated. But I just think there's times where I just kind of get a little overwhelmed by how much has to be done. So like before we started recording, I'm editing 2 podcast episodes that have to go out today. I have 3 more interviews later today. So I'm balancing editing, and then I'm jumping into a recording, and then I'm back to editing. and then I'm answering emails and like, and this is my day off. I should be like having fun time or doing something else. But when I come down to my computer and turn this on and you jump on the camera with me, this is the best moment for me as a podcaster, as I get to interact with somebody else and not only have you come on my show, but let people meet you. If I can build an audience, I want to build my audience not for me. I want to build my audience for you. I want my audience to find out about the Real Happy Hour podcast and to find out about Ola and go, I want more of this in my life and come follow you. That's kind of my goal, I guess, in all of the podcasts that I do. Ola, is I feel like my role in this world is to create a space to honor other people. And if something comes back to me in the process, amazing. But that's not my motivation. I'm not here to make a lot of money. I'm not here to get a lot of followers. I'm here to introduce great people to other great people and then get out of the way. That's kind of my goal. So if someone listening to our conversation today, they hit play on our episode, they hear about your show and they come over and start listening to you, even if they leave my show and never come back, but they go to you, that's a success for me. Then I know we're doing the right thing because a new follower found you and fell in love with your podcast. My job is done.
Wow, that sounds so beautiful. It's really, we need more people like you in the world. Like it's really amazing to just hear that. Like that is your why.
Yeah.
Like you're really out here just trying to just it's really beautiful. I just had to say that.
So again, and every episode I'm holding myself accountable to that. I don't have any ads in my podcasts. If anything, I'll get an ad from a podcast like yours. I'll put your ad in my show because I want people to hear you and come to you. I'd rather do that than sell a mattress or a supplement or something that, doesn't really mean as much to me personally. Yeah, I would love the money. Of course, I would love the money. My wife, she would love me to make money because this takes up a lot of time in the calendar. Yes, there's a lot of reasons to make money with your podcast. But if it's the only reason you're podcasting and you don't care about your audience, you don't care about your guests, your why is I want to make money, that's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard to do for a long term. So you need to find a why that brings you to the microphone, like you mentioned, and like the way I'm thinking, you need a why that brings you to the microphone on the days when there's 1,000 other things to do and you don't feel that motivated. What is the thing that brings you back? And focus on that. And if that's meeting great people and having interaction with them, then that's why I'm here. And I can't wait for the next person I get to interact with because it's another opportunity to build my network, to build other people up and grow their audience and help them on their journey. And as you give me these great compliments, and I truly appreciate it. Oh, that really means so much for me to hear you say that was appreciated back to me. I want you to understand, as a podcaster, even with 10 episodes, you're the same person for someone else who hasn't even started yet. They listen to your show and you're the person that they look up to. You're the person that you inspire them as someone who hasn't even started a podcast. They're like, if I could get a chance to talk to Ola, I would love to speak to this guy because I love his show. He's a great person. And just like you get a little starstruck when you think about the great people you want to meet, there's someone listening to your show, Ola, who thinks the same of you. And I want to encourage you to think of when you come to the microphone in every episode, there's a person listening who has been waiting for your next episode. They're waiting to hear your voice because there's something about you that they just love and they respect you as a host of a podcast. They admire you and they want to learn from you. So always remember that person every time you come to the microphone and think of them when you're recording because they're going to show up. And in the early days, it might be one person, it might be 10 people. but they could be watching television, listening to music, playing video games. No, they're here listening to you because there's something about you in your podcast that really means something to them. So in a very crowded, busy world, they chose you. That's a pretty powerful thing if you think about it.
Wow, that is really powerful. I never thought about it like that. But yeah, it is true because even when I find other podcasts, like I I listen to them and I'm inspired by them and I keep coming back to them because there's something that is connecting me to them.
Right.
There's some sort of heart connection that I'm feeling. And so I'm inclined to just come back and learn and be inspired and it's funny to be at the other side where there could possibly be someone who's feeling the same about me because I never thought about that before. So that's really beautiful. That alone is a motivation for it by itself to just keep going because you don't know who you're inspiring by just the steps you're taking.
And so maybe one little tip for you in your podcast. Think about this, either doing a solo episode once in a while where you talk just directly to your audience. It could be a shorter episode, a bonus episode, whatever, but you just talk to them, just you and them, and start building that bridge. Or if you don't want to do a solo episode on its own, at the end of your episode, your guest is gone, the interview's over, you could add a little piece at the very end where you just talk to your listener one-on-one. Maybe you kind of do a recap, you kind of summarize what you talked about with your guest, but it's your thoughts and what you think of what you talked about the Barbie movie. Okay, now what is your thoughts? What's your opinion based on what we just listened to? And what do you want to say directly to the listener? That this is your opportunity to speak to them together because they're listening with their headphones. It's very intimate that they're listening to you. You're in their ears. And it's a very private conversation going on between the two of you as the host and the listener. How do you bring them in? How do you build that bridge? And maybe just speak to them at some point during your podcast and try it. Maybe put it at the end, because if someone truly loves your podcast, they're going to listen right to the very end. They're not just there for the beginning. They're going to follow you all the way through your story to the end of the podcast. They're still there. And the people listening to our episode right now are those people. They've been listening this far, which is amazing. And these are the people that are really, truly committed to this podcast and to having you on the show and hearing your thoughts. So address them, speak to them, and let them know you really appreciate them for being here with you. And try to find a unique way of doing that. Practice, see what works, and then look at your analytics, look at those stats, and see, are people listening longer to your episode? Are they still falling off? Or how can you fix that? And maybe ask a question to your audience at this point, or give them a secret word, a saying, and have them respond to you on social media with that word. So it could be Barbie. Anyone listening to this episode, thank you for listening with me and Ola. If you could respond with the word Barbie on social media or on email or my speak pipe on my website, just leave me a message, Barbie. That we both know, Ola and I both know that you've been listening to the podcast. See how we did this at the end? Now, for the listener that's listening, they're like, Barbie, that's easy. And now I want to go check out Ola's episode about Barbie, but we just used a word that brings people into the group. And when those people respond to your podcast, Ola, and they come back with Barbie as a key word or a special secret word, then reach back out to them. Thank you. Oh, you responded with Barbie. That is so great. Dave, thank you for listening to my show. I hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you for responding. And you open the door to communicate with your listeners. And now you have a conversation, not just a one-way conversation. You get to speak with your audience and interact with them and turn them into casual listeners to friends and family of your podcast by just bringing them in and giving them an opportunity to respond. So there's a suggestion for your show. What can you hide in the podcast to get your audience to respond to you? And when they respond, make sure you're ready and you respond back.
I'm definitely going to do that. I'm definitely going to do that. That is an amazing tip to
And
use.
I'm putting it out there. You do it and I will respond.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Yes.
So even if it's just you and I, Ola, having fun together, I'm ready. I will respond to your next episode or next time you do your recording and you hide that word in there. Put it somewhere near the end, right? Don't put it right at the beginning. Put it at the end. And I promise I will respond.
Awesome. I'm
Okay.
looking forward to doing that. I'm definitely going to do that. I have another question for you.
Yeah.
You've got 7 podcasts. Like how?
How?
How? How? And did you start them at the same time or
Yeah.
and how? Yeah, that's
Okay. So I'm in a podcasters group right now. It's hosted by a gentleman named David Hooper. He has a podcast called The Big Podcast. And he's an amazing podcast host. I love listening to his show. And I'm in one of his private groups right now with a bunch of other podcasters. And in the group, you have to say, what is the name of your podcast and tell us about it. And I went into the group going, what is the name of my pod? I have 7. Which one do you want to talk about? So I put that out in the group and the response was like, how? How is that even possible? They're like, oh, you must do this full time. No, I work full time and I do this on my days off. So each of the podcasts started at different times and they're all about different topics. One of my podcasts alone is for authors. It's only 19 months old. I have 257 episodes in 19 months. Most podcasters do an episode a week, which is 52 a year. I have 256 in 19 months. I have my calendar booked into October of 2023 with more interviews to come. I have more interviews than I can even handle for that show, and I just keep making episodes. That's one podcast. I have this podcast with 120 episodes, and this podcast is just over a year old. I have all my other shows. And for me, what I love is I'll get somebody who comes on my podcast. I have a podcast for dads. Okay. It's called Dad Space. I'll meet with another dad who's written a book. He's a dad and he has a podcast. Guess what? I can have you on 3 different podcasts that I have with 3 different audiences and have 3 interviews, and I get to expose you to 3 different groups of people. That is so much fun for me because I get to have conversations with you on multiple levels and go deep on topics that could be about writing, about podcasting, and about being a father. That is so great for me. I love that because I get to know my guest even more. So the biggest thing for me, if you're going to do something as crazy as having 7 podcasts, I don't advise it, is be organized and make sure you don't lose your passion for any of your shows because you're representing different audiences that all are looking for something for your next episode. So you really need to step up. You got to be organized and you have to have the same amount of passion for all of them. I have 3 children, Ola. I have the same passion for my 3 children all the time. I don't
are you
value one more than the other.
are you
They
a Virgo
all.
by any
I
chance?
am Scorpio.
Okay.
There you go. So I
Wow.
just find value in my children. I find value in my relationship with my partner. I find value in my podcasting, and I show up for them and I make sure that they get the best of me. And if I can't give them my best, I need to take a break. And that's kind of what I do.
Wow. Just listening to you, I was a bit overwhelmed there. It's really beautiful and it's really aspirational. Like, and I also like the fact that, you can sort of use one guest to sort of, for different shows because there's different listeners and
Yeah.
it's very smart to be honest. That's really, really good. Um, how soon did you start the first? Did you start the second?
The first podcast was called the Upcycle Canada podcast. My wife and I have a small business called Upcycle Canada, and we take things that people don't want and we make new things out of them instead of them going into the garbage, into the landfill. So we rescue items, broken things, and we make new things and sell them. So that's called Upcycle Canada. I started that podcast and we started talking about Upcycle Canada as our side hustle. So we started sliding into side hustle conversations that had nothing to do with being eco-friendly and saving things from the landfill. And we're like, wait a minute, that's a different audience. We want to focus in on being eco-friendly and have that podcast. But then we started talking about side hustle. So I'm like, well, we'll start the Living My Side Hustle podcast. So they kind of started about 2 months apart as our conversation seemed to gravitate away from our main topic. We're like, either we stop talking about side hustles or we create something that goes with it. And the beauty of having these multiple shows is I can use shows to leverage off each other. And I've kind of created my own little podcast network by having these shows. So one podcast advertises the other podcast, and I can kind of bounce people back and forth between all 7. And I get the opportunity then to grow all of them at once with the leverage of all of them. So what I'm looking to do in the future is to help new podcasters who have 0 audience. They're starting with 0. They don't have social media. They want to start a podcast. They have no influence out in the world, but they want to start a podcast. So what I want to do is kind of bring them into my group of 7 as kind of the 8th podcast, and then use my 7 shows to promote their show and get them to start faster with a bigger audience than starting with no listeners. I'd love to kind of bring them in and leverage all of the people listening to this show and my other 6 shows and say, here's a good way to start. And what I want to do is help somebody go from 0 episodes to 10, because a lot of people stop at 10 or don't get to 10. I want to help you get from 0 episodes to 10 by being a part of my group of podcasts and using my audience to help you grow. And after 10, you're free to leave and continue, but I want to get you past the spot where most people stop, because I think your voice matters and your podcast matters. And I don't want to see you give up too early because things aren't going for you as well as you expected. So come borrow my audience and let's grow together. And let me help you by introducing you to my friends who follow my shows, because I know they're going to love you just as much as I love to work with you as well.
That's really good. That's really beautiful. It's really, really good.
So that's kind of my new network idea that I'm fleshing out right now. I'm working through the details. And again, I just want people to not give up, because I've heard some really amazing podcasters, Ola, who have a message for the world. Their podcast can save somebody's life or change somebody's life. And after episode 3, they don't see the results that they expected and they give up. And I want to stop that. I want people who think or know that their podcast is important. I want to see them be successful and see like what you're doing. That's amazing. So my challenge to you as a podcaster is to think of those people who reach out to you and go, Ola, can I have a few minutes of your time? I want to start a podcast. Can you help me? I hope that you have that availability to help that person who wants to be in the same spot where you are, because you have a show, you have a gift, you have a lot of knowledge and expertise that you could help somebody start their show. So please take what you've learned and help the next person, help them along as well, because they're following and they love what you're doing.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to share all that I know and I've experienced. And uh, one of the, like when I started and I found a studio, like, and that was how one of the early parts of podcasting that I always wanted to share was, okay, when you want to start a podcast, find a studio. And that's because I like watching podcasts. So I would always say, if you want to start, find a studio, find the equipment and, start recording. But seeing as how it has been somewhat overwhelming because I just started and I had to learn how to make use of virtual recordings, because my very first virtual recording, I didn't like it, but I had to learn how to improve the editing and how to make sure I've got the right sound, the right headphones, the right, all of that,
Right.
make that all come together. So that has then made it podcasting easier. So yeah, just find the easiest way you can connect with people and just start. And you, like you mentioned, you don't know who could be listening and you could save someone's life. And it's It's really amazing the power of our words. It's really amazing the power of technology. It's really amazing the power of connectivity. And it's just really, really good to just have a voice, have a message for the world.
And podcasting from day one has always been about it being open, that you don't have to have permission to start a podcast. You don't have to have a license or a radio station or a studio. You don't have to have any of these things if you can't afford it. You don't need permission. You don't need anyone standing over your shoulder saying you can or you can't. It's supposed to be open for everyone. So you can start with your phone. Yeah, you can always get better. You can get better equipment down the road, but it's not about money. It's not about a microphone. It's about getting your message into the world. So whatever that thing is that keeps you from starting your show, then let's address that and let's remove that because your message matters. And even in a crowded space, you mentioned it earlier, the most unique thing about your podcast is you as the host and how you see the world. No one else can copy that. Nobody. So start your podcast.
And also, don't be offended if your family and closest friends don't care.
Right.
Because the message is not necessarily for them.
Right.
So don't focus on that. And that I used to focus on that when I was a journalist. When I started back like in 2012, 13, like I used to lay so much emphasis on, this is what everyone is dealing with their own thing, especially people closest to you. They're happy to celebrate with you if you want to celebrate. But if you're expecting them to sort of have a lot of focus on what you're creating because you're so proud of it, don't be disappointed if they're not as excited because they're supporting you in a different way. But the actual message you have is for a broader audience. It's for people you would don't even imagine. And they're the ones that really need that message. And that's something I've had to learn. And so I don't even, like when I go see my family, I'm not even expecting them to say anything about my podcast. But surprisingly, they actually do. So I'm like, okay, yeah. I am podcasting and okay, yeah. Because I just switch off and I don't expect them to have that much presence for it because it's really not for them. None of my family or some of my friends are into film and media. We will talk about films, that's as much as we will do. But for me to expect them to be invested in this, it's just putting unnecessary pressure on them.
Yeah.
And what's that thing about expectation is hidden resentment or something like that. So once you just take that away and know that your message is for a broader audience, people that just it makes life easier for you and you stress a little less.
It's a perfect place to end. Well, I can't say that any better at all. You nailed that. I have family and friends who don't even know what a podcast is. So, and here I am doing this in 7 shows and they have like no clue what I'm doing. So, that's a great spot. I love that. Where do we find your show? How do we connect with you? And before you answer that question, I would love to have you come back, Ola, in the future and carry on and have more conversation with you and support you more in the future. So I'll leave the door open anytime you want to come back and have a conversation about podcasting, about your show, about what you're learning. I'd love to get an update in the future from you. So please come back in the future, but let everybody know, where do we find your show?
I would absolutely love to come back. I love what you're doing. It's your energy is beautiful and calm and positive and soothing and we need more people like you, David.
Thank you.
So definitely I'm running back. Any opportunity, chance to be back, I'm
Okay.
back here. And you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. No, not Twitter, sorry. Instagram and TikTok. And you can find me at the Real Happy Hour podcast. So the Real REEL Hour podcast. Real yes, the Real Happy
Yeah.
the Real Happy Hour podcast. And
Good.
yes, so you can stream all my episodes via any streaming platform you listen on, Apple
Yeah.
Podcast, Spotify, Amazon, Google Music, everywhere. And I'm also on YouTube. You just search for the Real Happy Hour podcast, and you can also find me on my personal Instagram because that's the most engaging platform that I use for all my content, which is at Ola Adesanya _ and but you can also just find me on my Instagram too, or TikTok at The Real Happy Hour Podcast, and you can see all that I do. One thing I did recently was I joined an accountability group where we're posting every day on social media, and so that's just reach more people. And so it's been a challenge, and we're pushing each other to just keep creating content to get engagement, and so I'm looking forward to engaging with your listeners on here on my social media, and just keep building on the content, building on the engagement, and growing and inspiring each other and sharing that positivity out into the world.
Excellent. Ola, thank you so much. We'll have links to everything in the show notes. So many great places to connect. Let Ola know that you've heard about his podcast here. Remember the keyword Barbie. Respond to Ola, respond to myself. Let us know that you heard that word Barbie during our podcast episode. And you'll get a special shout out as well from us on our podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing your special word, Ola, in the future. So yes. I'm waiting. Okay. Thanks, Ola, for being part of the podcast. Everyone go check out the show notes. Ola, this has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you. And congratulations on 10 episodes. I can't wait to talk about the next 10, the next 100. Lots of good stuff ahead for you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.